Good morning, everyone. This is Russell Rucker, and yes, I'm here for another constitutional talk. And boy, have I got a show for you today. I want to talk to you for a moment, anyway, first about my new book. This is the Founders Encyclopedia, and I will be going through this a little bit today because I want to talk about Joseph Warren. Joseph Warren is one of our founders. He was a Son of Liberty member. He didn't live a long life. He was born in 1741 and he died on June 17, 1775 at the Battle of Bunker Hill. And he chose to fight at the worst, hardest part of the battle, and that was at the base of Breed's Hill. And when they ran out of ammunition, he tried to help those that escape off of the hill. And he was shot dead instantly. He was an active member of the Sons of Liberty. He served on the committee that gathered evidence of the Boston Massacre. Warren wrote A True Patriot, an essay that Eads and Gills published in their paper. British officers tried to put them on trial for publishing it. In 1774, he wrote a song, Free America, to the tune of the British Grenadiers. He served on the Committee of Correspondence. He was a good orator and delivered speeches during the commencement of the Boston Massacre for 2 different years. Now, I have a copy of one of those speeches, and I will be reading it to you, and so you get a real good feel for what we were talking about. Now, the speech I'm reading is from 1775. It's from March 5th, 1775, 5 years after the Boston Massacre. And I was really excited to see this week because I had never read it myself. And it's a really good idea. You get a good feel for original documentation. And that's really what this is. It's written in the old English, and it's a little difficult to read until you get an understanding of exactly how to read those strange letterings, and the F's, the S's that look like F's, and that kind of thing. But I just want you to get a feel for it, and we'll talk to you on the other side. Okay, thank you. My ever-honored fellow citizens, it is not without the most humiliating conviction of my want of ability that I now appear before you, but the sense I have of the obligation I am under to obey the calls of my country at all times, together with an animating recollection of your indulgence exhibited upon ye many occasions, has induced me once more, undeserving so as I am, to throw myself upon that candor which looks with kindness on the feeblest efforts of an honest mind. You will not now expect the elegance, the learning, the fire, the encapturating strains of elegance which charmed you when a Lovell, a Church, or a Hancock spoke. But you will permit me to say that with a sincerity equal to theirs, I mourn over my bleeding country. With them, I weep at her. I weep at her distress, and with them deeply resent the many injuries she has received from the hands of cruel and unreasonable men. That personal freedom is the natural right of every man, and that property or an exclusive right to dispose of what he has honestly acquired by his own labor necessarily arises therefrom are truths which common sense has placed beyond the reach of contradiction, and no man or body of men can, without being guilty of flagrant injustice, claim a right to dispose of the persons or acquisitions of any other man or body of men, unless it can be proved that such a right has arisen from the same compact between the parties in which it has been explicitly and freely granted. If I may, be indulged in taking a retrospective view of the first settlement of our country. It will be easy to determine with what degree of justice in the late Parliament of Great Britain have affirmed the power of giving away that property which the Americans have earned by their labor. Our fathers have nobly resolved never to wear the yoke of despotism. And feeling the European world at that time throw in indolence and cowardice, falling a prey to tyranny, bravely threw themselves upon the bottom of the ocean, determined to find a place in which they might enjoy their freedom or perish in the glorious attempts. Approving heaven beheld the favorite ark dancing upon the waves and graciously preferred it until the chosen families were brought in safety in these western regions. They found the land swarming with savages who threatened death with every kind of torture. But savages and death with torture were far less terrible than slavery. Nothing was so much the object of their abhorrence as the tyrant's power. They knew that it was more fate to dwell with man in his most unpolished state than in a country where arbitrary powers prevail. Even anarchy itself, that the bugbear held up by the tools of power, though truly to be depreciated, is indefinitely less dangerous to mankind than the arbitrary government. Anarchy can be but of short duration. For when men are at liberty to pursue that course which is most conducive to their own happiness, they will soon come into it, and from the rudest state of nature, order and good government must soon arise. But tyranny, when once established, entails its curse on a nation to the latest period of time, unless some daring genius inspired by heaven shall, unappalled by danger, bravely execute the arduous design of restoring liberty and life to this enslaved, murdered country. The tools of power in every age have racked their inventions to justify the few in sporting with the happiness of the many, and having found their sophistry too weak to hold mankind in bondage, have impiously dared to force religion, the daughter of the King of England, to become a prostitute in the service of hell. They taught the princes honored with the name of Christian might bid defiance to the founder of their faith, might pillage pagan countries and deluge them with blood, only because they boasted themselves to be the disciples of that teacher who strictly charges followers to do to others as they would that others should do unto them. This country, having been discovered by the English subject in the year 1620, was, according to the system which a blind superstition of those times supported, deemed the property of the crown of England. Our ancestors, when they resolved to quit their native soil, obtained from King James a grant of certain lands in North America. This they probably did to silence the evils of their enemies, for it cannot be doubted, but they despised the pretended right which he clamored thereto. Certain it is that he might with equal propriety and justice have made them a grant of the planet Jupiter, and their subsequent conduct plainly shows that they were too well acquainted with humanity and the principles of natural equality, so that to suppose that they grant themselves any right to take possession. They therefore entered into a treaty with the natives and bought from them lands, nor have I yet obtained any information that our ancestors ever pleaded, or that the natives even regarded the grant from the English crown. The business was transacted by the parties in the same independent manner that it would have been had neither of them ever or heard of the island of Great Britain. Having become the honest proprietors of the foil, they immediately applied themselves to the cultivation of it. And they soon beheld the virgin earth teeming with the richest fruits, a grateful recompense for their unwearying toil. The fields began to wave with ripening harvest, and the late barren wilderness was seen to blossom like the rose. The savage natives saw with wonder the delightful change, and quickly formed a scheme to obtain that by fraud or force, which nature meant as a reward of industry alone. But the illustrious emigrants soon convinced the rude invaders that they were not less ready to take the field for battle than for labor. And the insidious foe was driven from their borders as often as he ventured to disturb them. The crown of England looked with indifference on the contest, and our ancestors were left alone to combat with the natives. Nor is there any reason to believe that it ever was intended by the one party or expelled by the other, that the greater should defend and maintain the grantees in peaceful possession of the lands named in their patents. And it appears plainly from the history of those times that neither the prince nor the people of England thought themselves much interested in the matter. They had not then any idea of the thousandth part of those advantages, which they since have, and we are most heartily willing they should continue to reap from us. But when an infinite expense of toil and blood, this widely extended continent had been cultivated and defended, when the hardy adventurers justly expected that they and their defenders should peacefully have enjoyed the harvest of those fields which they had sown, and the fruit of those vineyards which they had planted, the country which they thought worthy the attention of the British ministry, and the only justifiable and only successful means of rendering the colonies serviceable to Britain were adopted. By an intercourse of friendly offices, the two countries became united in affection, that they thought not of any distinct or separate interests. They found both countries flourishing and happy. Britain saw her commerce extended and her wealth increased, her lands raised to an immense value, her fleets riding triumphantly on the ocean, the terror of her arms spreading to every quarter of the globe. The colonist found himself free and thought himself secure. He dwelt under his own vine and under his own fig tree, and had none to make him afraid. He knew indeed that by purchasing the manufactures of Great Britain, he contributed to its greatness. He knew that all the wealth that his labor produced centered in Great Britain, but that far from exciting his envy, filled him with the highest pleasure. That thought supported him in all his toils. When the business of the day was past, he solaced himself with the contemplation of perhaps entertaining his listening family with the recital of some glorious transaction which shines conspicuously in the history of Britain. Or perhaps the elevated fancy led him to foretell with a kind of enthusiastic confidence the glory, the power, the duration of an empire which should extend from one end of the earth to the other. He saw, or thought he saw, the British nation risen to a pitch of grandeur which cast a veil over Roman glory and ravished with the preview, boasted a race of British kings whose names should echo through those realms, where Cicerus, Alexander, and the Caesars were unknown, princes for whom millions of grateful subjects redeemed from slavery and pagan ignorance should with thankful tongues offer up their prayers and praises to this transcending great and beneficent being of whom kings reign and princes decree justice. These pleasing connections might have continued. Their delightful prospects might have been every day extended, and even the reveres of the most warmly imagination might have been realized. But unhappily for us, unhappily for Britain, the madness of a Aversion minister of state has drawn a sable curtain over the charming scene, and in its stead has brought upon the stage discord, envy, hatred, and revenge, with civil war close in the rear. Some demon and evil hour suggested to a short-sighted financier the hateful project of transferring the whole property of the king's subjects in America to his subjects in Britain. The claim of the British Parliament to tax the colonies can never be supported, but by such transfer the right of the House of Commons of Great Britain to originate any tax or to grant money is altogether derived from their being elected by the people of Great Britain and act for them. And the people of Great Britain cannot confer on their representatives a right to give or grant anything which they themselves have not a right to give or grant personally. Therefore, it follows that the members chosen by the people of Great Britain to represent them in Parliament have, by virtue of their being so chosen, any right to give or grant American property or to lay any tax upon the lands of purchase of the colonists. It is because the lands and the people in these colonies are bona fide, owned by and justly belong to the people of Great Britain. But as has been observed, every man has a natural right to personal freedom, consequently a right to enjoy what is acquired by his own labor. And as it is evident that the property in this country have been acquired by our own labor, it is the duty of the people of Great Britain to produce some compact in which we have explicitly given up to them a right to dispose of our persons or our property. Until this is done, every attempt of theirs or of those whom they have deputed to act for themselves, to give or grant any part of our property, is directly repugnant to every principle of reason and natural justice. But I may boldly say that such a compact never existed, no, not even in imagination. Nevertheless, the representatives of a nation long famed for justice and the exercise of every noble virtue have been prevailed on to adopt the fatal scheme. And although the dreadful consequences of the wicked policy have already shaken the empire to its center, yet still it is persisted in, regardless of the voice of reason, deaf to the prayers of supplication, and unaffected with the flowering tears of suffering millions. The British ministry still hug the darling idol, and every rolling year affords death instances of the absurd devotion with which they worship it. Alas, how has the distraction of the British councils blasted our dwelling hopes and spread a gloom over this Western Hemisphere. The hearts of Britons and Americans, which lately felt the generous glow of mutual confidence and have now burned with jealousy and rage, through but of yesterdays I recollect deeply affected at the ill-boding change. The happy hours that passed whilst Britain and America rejoiced in the prosperity and greatness of each other. Heaven grant those hallowed days may soon return. But now the Briton too often looks on the American with an evilous eye. taught to consider his just plea for the enjoyment of his earnings as the effect of pride and stubborn opposition to the parent country, whilst the American beholds the Briton as the ruffian, ready first to take away his property, and next, what is dear is every virtuous man, the liberty of his country. When the measures of administration has disgusted the colonies to the lightest degree, and the people of Great Britain had artifice and tallyho been irritated against America, an army was sent over to enforce submission to certain acts of the British Parliament, which reason scorned to countenance, and which placement and pensioners were found unhappy to support. Martial law and the government of a well-regulated city are so entirely different that it has always been considered as improper to quarter troops in populous cities, as frequent disputes must necessarily arise between the citizens and the soldier, even if no previous animosity subsist. And it is further certain from the consideration of the nature of mankind, as well as from constant experience, the standing armies always endanger the liberty of the subject. But when the people on the one part considered the army as sent to enslave them, and the army on the other were taught to look at the people as if in a state of rebellion, it was but just to fear the most disagreeable consequences. Our fears, we have seen, were but too well grounded. The many injuries offered to the town I pass over in silence. I cannot now mark out the path which led to that unequaled scene of horror, the sad remembrance of which takes the full possession of the fowl. The Sanctuary Theater against opens itself to view. The baleful images of terror crowd around me. The discontented ghosts with hollow groans appear to solemnize the anniversary of the 5th of March. Approach we then, melancholy walk of death. Hither let me call the gay companion. Here let me drop a farewell tear upon that body, which so late he saw vigorous and warm with social mirth. Hither let me lead the tender mother to weep over her beloved son. Come, widowed mourner, here fatigue thy grief. Behold thy murdered husband gasping on the ground. And to complete the pompous throe of the wretchedness, bring in each hand thy infant child to bewail their father's fate. Take heed, ye orphan babies, left whilst your streaming eyes are fixed upon the ghastly corse. Your feast slide on the loan, bespattered with your father's brains. Enough! This tragedy need not be heightened by an infant welting in the blood of him that gave it birth. Nature reluctantly shrinks already from the view, and the chill blood rolls slowly backward to its fountain. We wildly stare about, and with amazement ask, who spread the ruin round us? What wretch has dared deface the image of this God? Has haughty France or cruel Spain felt forth her midrams? Has the grim savage Ruth again from the far distant wilderness, or does some fiend fierce from the depths of hell with all its rancorous malice, with the apostate damned, can feel twang her destructive how and hurt her deadly arrows at our breast? No, none of these. But how astonishing it is, the hand of Britain that inflicted the wound. The arms of George, our rightful king, have employed to shred the blood which freely would have flown at his command when justice or the honor of his crown had called his subjects to the field. But pity, grief, astonishment, with all the softer movements of the soul, must now give way to stronger passions. Say, fellow citizens, what dreadful thought now swells your heaving bosoms? You fly to arms. Sharp indication slashes from each eye. Revenge gnashes her iron teeth. Death grins in hideous simile, secure to drench his greedy jaws in human gore, whilst hovering furious darkens all the air. But stop, my bold, adventurous countrymen. Stain not your weapons with the blood of Britons. Attend to reason's voice. Humanity puts in her claim and sues to be given, to be again admitted to her wonted seat, the bosom of the brave. Revenge is far beneath the mobile mind. Many perhaps compelled to rank among the vile assassins, do from their inmost souls detest the barbarous actions. The winged death, shot from your arms, may chance to pierce from some breast that bleeds already for your injured country. The storm subsides, a solemn pause engulfs. You spare upon condition. They depart, they go, they quit their country. They no more shall offense. Thus closes the important drama. And could it have been conceived that we again should have seen a British army in our land, sent to enforce obedience in acts of parliament, destructive to our liberty, but the royal ear, far distant from this Western world, has been assaulted by the tongue of slander, and villains as traitors alike to king and country have received upon a gracious prince to clothe his countenance with wrath and to erect the hostile banner against a people ever affectionate and loyal to him and his illustrious predecessors of the House of Hanover. Our streets are again filled with armed men. Our harbor is crowded with ships of war, but these cannot intimidate us. Our liberty must be perceived. It is far dearer than life. We hold it ever dear as our allegiance. We must defend it against the attacks of friends as well as enemies. We cannot suffer even Britain to ravish it from us. No longer could we reflect with generous pride on the heroic actions of our American forefathers. No longer boast our origins from that far famed island whose warlike sons have so often drawn their well-tried swords to save her from the ravages of tyranny. Could we but for a moment entertain the thought of giving up our liberty? The man who meanly will submit to wear a shackle condemns the noblest gift of heaven and implicitly affronts the God that made him free. It was a maximum of the Roman people which eminently conducted to the greatness of that state, never to despair of the commonwealth. The maxim may prove a statutary to us now, as it did to them. Short-sighted mortals, so not the numerous links of small and great events, which form the chains on which the fate of kings and nations is suspended. Safe and prosperity, though pleading for a day, have often sunk a people into effeminacy and sloth. Hardships and dangers, though we forever strive to shun them, have frequently called forth such virtues as have commanded the applause and reverence of an admiring world. Our country loudly calls you to circumstance vigilant, active, and brave. Perhaps all gracious heavens averted. Perhaps the power of Britain, a nation great in war by some malignant influence, may be employed to enslave you. But let not even this discourage you. Her arms, 'tis true, have filled the world with terror. Her troops have trespassed the laurels of the field. Her fleets have rowed triumphantly on the sea. And when or where did you, my countrymen, depart gloriously from the field of fight? You too can shew the triumphs of the forefathers' victories, and your own can name the fortresses and battles you have won, and many of you count the honorable scars of wounds received whilst fighting for your king and country. Where justice is the standard, heaven is the warrior's shield, but conscious guilt unnerves the arms. It lifts the sword against the innocent. Britain, united with these colonies by commerce and affection, by interest in blood, may mock the threats of France and Spain, may be the feast of the universal empire. But should American tither by force, or those more glorious engines, luxury and corruption, even be brought into the state of vassalage, Britain must lose her freedom also. No longer shall she sit the empress of the sea. Her ships no more shall waste her thunders over the wide ocean. The wreath shall wither on her temples. Her weakened arm shall be able to defend her coasts, and she at last must bow her venerable head to some proud foreign despotic rule. But if from past events we may venture to form a judgment of the future, we justly may expect that the devices of our enemies will but intercease the triumph of our country. I must indulge a hope that Britain's liberty, as well as ours, will eventually be preferred by the virtue of America. The attempt of the British Parliament to raise a revenue from America and our denial of their right to do so, it have excited an almost universal inquiry into the rights of mankind in general and of British subjects in particular, the necessary result of which must be such a liberality of sentiment and such a jealousy of those in power as will, better than an adamantine wall, to secure us against the future approaches of despotism. The malice of the Boston Port Bill has been defeated in a very considerable degree by giving you an opportunity of deserving and our brethren in our thither colonies an opportunity of bestowing those benefactions which have delighted your friends and astonished your enemies, not only in America but in Europe also. And what is more valuable still, the sympathetic feelings for a brother in distress, and the grateful emotions excited in the breast of him who finds relief must forever endear each to the other and form those indolences, bonds of friendship and affection on which the preservation of our rights to evidently depend. The mutilation of our charter has made every other colony jealous for its own. For this, if once submitted to by us, would sit on float the property and the government of every British settlement upon the continent. If charters are not deemed sacred, how miserable precautions is everything founded upon them. Even the sending of troops to put these acts in execution is not without advantages to us. The exactness and beauty of their discipline inspire our youth with ardor in the pursuit of military knowledge. Charles the Invincible taught Peter the Great the art of war. The Battle of Pultowa convinced Charles of the proficiency Peter had made. Our country is in danger, but not to be despaired. Our enemies are numerous and powerful, but we have many friends, determined to be free, and heaven and earth will aid the resolution. On you depends the fortunes of America. You are to decide the important question on which rests the happiness and liberty of millions yet unborn. Act worthy of yourselves. A faltering tongue of hoary age calls on you to support your country. The lisping infant raised its suppliant hands, imploring defense against the monster slavery. Your fathers looked from their Castile feet with smiling approbation on their sons, who boldly stand forth in the cause of virtue, but sternly frown upon the inhuman merchants who, to secure the loaves and fishes to himself, would breed a serpent to destroy his children. But pardon me, my fellow citizens. I know you want no zeal or fortitude. You will maintain your rights or perish in the generous struggle. However difficult the combat, you never will decline it when freedom is the prize. And independence on Great Britain is not our aim. No, ours with is that Britain and the colonies may, like the oak and the ivy, grow and increase in strength together. But whilst the infatuated plan of making one part of the empire slaves to the other is persisted in the interest and safety of Britain, as well as the colonies, require that the wife measures recommended by the Continental Congress be steadily pursued, whereby the natural control between a parent honored and a child beloved may properly be brought to such an issue, as that the peace and happiness of both may be established upon the lasting basis. But if these specific measures are ineffectual, and it appears that the only way to safety is through the fields of blood, I know you will not turn your faces from your foes, but it will undauntedly press forward until tyranny is driven underfoot, and you have fixed your adopted goddess, liberty, fall by the Brunswick side of the American throne. You then, who nobly have espoused your country's cause, who generously has sacrificed wealth and case, who have despised the pomp and shew of tinselled greatness, refused the summons to the festive board, been deaf to the alluring calls of luxury and mirth, who have forsaken the downy pillow to keep your vigils by the midnight's lamp, for the salvation of your invaded country, that you might break the fowler's snares and disappoint the vulture of his prey. You then will reap that harvest of renown which you so justly have deserved. Your country shall pay her grateful tribute of applause. Even the children of your most invasive enemies, ashamed to tell them whom they sprang, while they in secret curse their stupid, cruel parents, shall join the great voice of gratitude to those who broke the fetters which their fathers forged. Having redeemed your country and secured the blessings of future generations, who, fired by your example, shall emulate your virtues and learn from you the heavenly art of making millions happy, with heartfelt joy, with transports all your own, you cry the glorious work is done. Then drop the mantle to some, young Elijah, and take your feast with kindred spirits in your native sky. Well, everybody, just to wrap up that speech, it's quite a fiery speech, isn't it? You know, I really intrigued with listening to Mr. Warren here. And the fact that he chose to die on Breed's Hill really was the decision he made, because he was not a private, but he fought as a private against the advice of his commanding forces, but he wanted to be put in the battle. He was a real important man. He helped get the information out to Revere and his counterpart during, the one by land, two by sea. He was the one that got that information that they were going to be leaving by sea. And so he was instrumental in all of that, and he slipped out of town during the Battle of Lexington and Concord, and helped command troops for that engagement they had out there. And just to let you know a little bit more about Joseph Warren, and I think he's an important man to consider here when we talk about our founders. And obviously, I thought him important enough so that I did put him in the Founders Encyclopedia here that has just been published. Please subscribe or follow to my channel. It helps me a lot. The more numbers I get, the more people we can reach. And our founding is important. And it's important to understanding our original documents, our Constitution, and all kinds of things. And it's important to understand speeches like this and why this speech was given. Yes, it was given as an anniversary speech, but it's also a call to arms, if you notice. And it's explaining a lot of things, a lot of reasons for what had occurred. Now, with that in mind, I'll catch you next time on the next Constitutional Talk. You folks have a good day now. Bye for now.